Hello, hi. We're about to start. We have started. Let's go over to the House of Commons. Prime Minister's questions.
Welcome back, number one.
Welcome.
Mr. Speaker. As is the last.
It's the last one of the year.
Before recess, I know the whole House will want to join me in wishing you and all the House staff a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I know members will also want to join me in sending our warmest wishes to our armed forces, both at home and stationed overseas, and our emergency services and all those who will be working over Christmas too. And finally, I know everyone will want to join me in wishing Mark Drakeford all the best as he moves on from his many
Drakeford
years
has just resigned
public service.
as First
Mr. Speaker,
Minister
this
of
morning
Wales.
I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my
going to talk about
duties in
Santa
this House,
delivering
and I shall have
presents?
further such meetings later today.
Live from
Can
the
I
House of
concur
Commons.
with the comments of the Prime Minister about our armed forces, Christmas and Mark Drakeford? My constituent, Mr. Speaker, Fred Bates, is 74, he has liver cancer and he's a victim of the contaminated blood products scandal. The Prime Minister had a chance to do right by Fred last week. But failed to do so and lost the vote in this House. After half a century, Fred wishes to know when he and fellow survivors will be compensated and get justice.
Half a century. Oh my word.
Mr. Speaker, this was an appalling tragedy, and my thoughts remain with all those concerned. I absolutely understand the strength of feeling on this. It was this government previously who set up the inquiry, which I participated in, and we fully understand the need for action. The government has crucially already accepted the moral case for compensation and acknowledged that justice does need to be delivered for the victims. My right honourable friend, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, will update the House on our next steps on the infected blood inquiry shortly.
Rexman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The tax cuts in the autumn statement
Thank you very
were
much,
extremely
Captain Bart Roberts.
welcome.
Oh, piss off. What tax cuts?
But in order to
The most
go
tax we've
further
ever been.
and to get the tax burden as low as it possibly can be, accurate and robust economic modelling is required. The Office of Budget Responsibility have been habitually wrong, and we had the spectacle last week of the head of the OBR saying that his latest forecast might be 30 billion out. So will my right honourable friend commit to finding a better system of financial modelling so we can get taxes lower?
Taxes lower.
Mr. Speaker, as
Highest
my honourable
taxes
friend
ever
knows, the
under the
OBR
Tories.
has brought greater transparency and
Tax and
independence
spend
to
and
the
spend
forecast in which
on
government policy is based.
Rwanda.
But it is right and it is required
290
to
million
produce an assessment
on
of its
Rwanda.
accuracy of its fiscal and economic forecasts at least once a year. But crucially,
200 million.
Thanks to our
Medpro
management of the
PPE.
economy, the fact that we have halved inflation.
The PPE that doesn't work.
We now have delivered the largest tax
Delivered.
cut in a
It's
generation,
delivered.
Mr. Speaker.
You've got delivered on your
And
bingo.
benefit families up and down the country from
Sorted.
January.
The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
I want to ask him about the COVID inquiry and why I can't remember anything.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we heard of the tragic death of a young man on the Bibby Stockholm.
Yes.
I know the whole House will want to send our deepest condolences to his family and friends. We must never let this happen again.
Yes.
I would also like to mark the retirement of my colleague and friend, Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales. Mark committed his life to public service and lives his values every day. Quietly and patiently, Mark has been a titan of Labour and Welsh politics, and we thank him for his service and wish him well. Mr. Speaker, Christmas is a time of peace on earth and goodwill to all. Has anyone told the Tory party?
Yay.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Christmas is also a time for families, and under the Conservatives, we do have a record number of them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to this point, at the beginning of the year, I set out some priorities that this government would deliver. For the
And you
people.
failed on all of them.
And over the course of this year, we
Deliver.
have,
I think
Mr.
you just said
Speaker,
deliver.
inflation halved, Mr. Speaker. The economy
That's what we need to
growing,
do.
debt falling.
The economy growing.
Action
Is
on
it?
the longest waiters.
Used
the
to us.
votes down by a third, and crucially, as we heard from
Votes
Honourable
down by
Friend,
a third.
tax cuts
Votes back
coming
down
help
to
working
what it
families
was
the new
in
year.
2021. Amazing
Mr.
stuff.
Speaker, he can spin it all he likes, but
An
the whole
all-time
country
high.
can see that yet again the Tory party is in meltdown and everyone else is paying the price.
Oh, thank you very much, Plum Duff,
He's
for the
kicked
£10 super chat.
He kicked the can down the road, but in the last week, his MPs have said of him, he's not capable enough. He's inexperienced. He's arrogant. A really bad politician. When they're shouting, this is what they said. So, well, come on. Who was it who said he's a really bad politician? Hands up. They're shouting. Well, what about inexperienced? Who was that? Or, and now there's got to be some hands for this, he's got to go. Oh, so, apparently he's holding a Christmas party next week.
Order! It's Christmas. No,
Hey.
but you might not want the Christmas present that I could give you. So please, Keir Starmer.
Oh, would it be a nice cup of
Apparently
tea?
he's holding a Christmas party next week. How's the invite list looking?
Oh, nobody likes you.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for all the comments. What I would say to him, he should hear what they have to say about him, Mr. Speaker.
Obviously, they're the opposition.
Right, do you want to be the first one? Because it is Christmas and I'm going to hear it. My constituents are going to have a Christmas like everyone else. They want to know how their Christmas is going to be affected. So want less of it from all sides. Keir Starmer.
But mostly to Tories.
The search of three wise men may take a little longer. But while they fight amongst themselves, there's a country out here that isn't being governed, where more than 100,000 people are paying hundreds more a month on their mortgages, energy bills going back up in January, the economy shrinking again, NHS waiting lists an all-time high. Doesn't he
8
think
million.
the government would be better off
8
fixing
million
the
operations.
messes they've already made rather than scrambling to create new ones?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about governing and spent the first two questions talking about political tittle-tattle, Mr. Speaker.
What?
What a joke. Well, let's get on to the substance, Mr. Speaker. Let's get on to the substance. He mentioned the things. What is the news that we've just heard in the last week? Well, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is education, Mr. Speaker, because that's how we spread opportunity in our country. And what have we learned?
Opportunity.
Where are the schools performing
Why you
best
entire
in the
front
United
bench are
Kingdom?
privately
In England,
educated.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the reforms of this Conservative government, rising up the league tables, giving our kids the start they need. And where are they plummeting
Giving the
down?
rich kids
in
the start they
Labour-run
need.
Wales.
Giving the rich kids the start they need. Not
He
too many
talks
private schools in
about
Wales.
children. Nearly 140,000 children are going to be homeless this Christmas.
Wow.
That is more than ever before.
140,000.
That's a shocking state of affairs, and it should shame this government. Instead of more social housing, house building is set to collapse. Instead of banning no-fault evictions, thousands of families are at risk of homelessness. Rather than indulging his backbenchers swanning around in their factions and their star chambers, pretending to be members of the mafia, when's he going to get a grip and focus on the country?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, let's just look at the
Pretending
facts.
to be
Let's
the
look at the
mafia.
facts. Actually,
5 families.
Rough sleeping in this country is down by 35%, Mr.
What,
Speaker.
compared with what? Your fucking government, mate.
There are hundreds
Compare
of
with your
thousands of
government.
fewer children in poverty today.
Compare with your government. Compare with who? Not compare with Labour.
We just had the data this last week. In the last year, an almost record number of new homes delivered, Mr. Speaker.
Almost
More than
record.
any
Not quite.
year of the last Labour government.
Didn't need the houses so badly then, mate. We needed them urgently in 2010.
Children homeless this Christmas, and he's utterly tone deaf.
Yeah.
And the rise in homelessness shows how these Tory crises merge and grow and damage the country.
Yeah.
Families like the Bradys in Wiltshire, both parents working full-time, with 2 young children, forced out of their home of 15 years by a no-fault eviction, now living in their van. Or 11-year-old Liam Walker, homeless this Christmas. He wrote a letter to Santa saying, "Please, can I have a forever home? I don't want any new toys. I just want all my old toys out of storage. I just want us to be happy again." Is there anything that could shame this government into putting the country first, then it's surely this little boy.
Mr. Speaker, if he really cared about building homes...
Shame.
If he really cared
Shame.
about building homes,
He'd become a
when there was an
Conservative.
opportunity in this House, Mr. Speaker, in this House, to back our plans to reform defective EU laws, to unlock 100,000 new homes, Mr. Speaker.
That's absolute
What
nonsense.
did he
Stop
do?
lying.
What did he do?
He voted
went
against
in
it
front
'cause
of
he's
the
the
cameras
opposition.
and said one thing and came in here and blocked it. Typical shameless opportunism.
Oh, he's really shouting. He squats the mic there. Peaked.
One more.
Mr. Speaker, is that
What a
really his
cumbersome.
Christmas message to Liam? Cocooned in his party
Yeah.
management breakfast. He just can't see the...
Order. Mr. Clever.
Rachel Reeves having a go there.
It's Christmas. I want a little bit of silence.
Okay, we know it's Christmas. You've said that 3 times
I'm going to get it
now.
one way or another, and that goes to each side.
You're going to get it one way or another. Oh my God.
Party management breakfast.
Blondie over there.
He just can't see the country in front of him and what they've done.
Yeah,
I'll finish
just
by
saying numbers.
thanking hard-working families across Britain who kept our country going. It's been an impossibly difficult year for so
Yeah.
many.
Yes.
I want to pay special tribute to our key workers, particularly those in the emergency services and those serving abroad in our forces, who even at this time of year are doing the vital work of protecting their country. I wish everyone, including the members opposite, a very happy and peaceful New Year. Will the Prime Minister join me?
Prime Minister.
I think, Mr.
Go on.
Speaker, he missed that I paid tribute to our emergency workers at the beginning of the session, Mr. Speaker. But let's see. No, because I think it is important because
Come
he
on.
talked about
Peace and
working
goodwill.
families. Of
No, he
course,
talked about peace and
Mr.
goodwill.
Speaker, I want to make sure that we support working
peace and
families,
goodwill
and
for
that's
this guy.
what we're actually delivering, Mr. Speaker. Because all he
Delivering.
has to offer them is borrowing
4 times now.
£28 billion a year. Which
What?
all it will do is push up their
Figures.
mortgage rates and push up their
Figures.
taxes. Meanwhile,
Figures.
what have we done? Delivered tax cuts for millions of working families.
No, you haven't.
Boosted
Taxes
the
higher than
national
ever.
living wage,
Stop
Mr.
lying.
Speaker.
Taxes are
Recruited
officially higher than ever.
50,000 more nurses, 20,000 more
No,
resources.
we've got less than we
Improved
had in
schools.
2010.
We've cut the cost of net zero for those working families.
No, you haven't.
We've cut the boat
You
cost
got
of
rid of net
workers.
zero. That's not the same as cutting the cost of
And
it.
That's the difference, Mr. Speaker. We're getting
What?
on and delivering for working
Delivering.
Britons.
That's the 5th time he said it.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the world struggles to
Hand-faced
agree
Hammond.
the future of the 1.5 commitment, in Wimbledon we're keen to do our bit. So to help my campaign to make EV charging access more widespread, can I ask my right honourable friend for 2 early Christmas presents? Will you speak to our right honourable friend, the Chancellor, to ask him to look again at the unfair differential rates of VAT on public
Gammon.
and private charging points? And will he ask our friend, our right honourable friend, the Levelling Up Secretary, to look at the bylaws that stop local councils making on-street parking and charging more accessible?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to tell my honourable friend that the Chancellor has already authorised over £2 billion of investment to support our transition to zero-emission vehicles, and we are well on track to reach 300,000 charge points by
HS2 went
2030.
as well,
and
yeah.
I can also tell him that we
we've
will
got a
consult on
train to
amending
nowhere.
the National Planning Policy Framework.
What a
to make sure that
disastrous
it
year.
prioritises
What a
the rollout
disastrous
of charge
13
points
years.
on top of the funding of almost £400 million to support
Just
local
numbers.
authorities. Spread these out so
Just
all
numbers.
our families have
£400
access to
million.
them when they need.
Just, yeah.
SNP
You're giving
leader
there
Stephen
290 million to Rwanda for nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister please share his Christmas message for children being bombed in Gaza this winter?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nobody wants to see this conflict go on for a moment longer than necessary. We urgently need more humanitarian pauses to get all the hostages out and to get life-saving aid into Gaza to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. And we have been consistent that we support what is a sustainable ceasefire, which means Hamas must stop launching rockets into Israel and release all the hostages.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, if the current actions of the Israeli government continue, then it is estimated that almost 1,400 more children will die between now and Christmas Day. Now, in the United Nations last night, our friends and allies in France, in Ireland, in Canada, in Spain and in Australia, they joined with 148 other nations to vote with courage, care and compassion for a ceasefire. The UK, they shamefully abstained. How can the Prime Minister possibly explain why 153 nations are wrong, yet Westminster is right?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said consistently, we're deeply concerned about the devastating impact of the fighting in Gaza on the civilian population. Too many people have lost their lives already, and this is something that we've stressed, and I've stressed personally to Prime Minister Netanyahu just last week. What we are doing practically is to get more aid into Gaza, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary is appointing a UK humanitarian coordinator, and in my conversations last week with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I pressed him on opening up the Kerem Shalom crossing so that more aid can flow in, and we are actively exploring the opportunity for maritime corridors, something that the UK is well placed to lead, and I can give him my assurance that we will work night and day to get more aid to those who desperately need it.
I think Flynn made a good point there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We expect our young folk to remain in educational training until they are 18, but many lack transport to get there. With the amazing head teacher of Alston Moor Federation, Jill Jackson, I secured funding from the council to get her students to college and pressed the council for a £500,000 bursary scheme to extend youth travel more widely. But we shouldn't have to do this. To secure equality of opportunity and true levelling up, will the Prime Minister look to mandate and support councils to provide post-16 transport so all our young people in towns, cities and rural areas can reach their next stage in life?
My honourable friend and the head teacher of Alston Moor Federation, Jill Jackson, have done a fantastic job in securing more funding, and I wish her well also, I believe, on her upcoming retirement. As he knows, our school travel policy ensures that no child is prevented from accessing education by lack of transport. Not only do we have home-to-school travel policies, but the 16 to 19 bursary fund can be used to support young people with transport costs, and more generally we're taking action to keep bus fares capped at £2, Mr. Speaker, but I'll happily make sure that my honourable friend gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss his proposals further.
Donaldson.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will be aware of unionist concerns about the need to remove the Irish sea border created by the protocol, and that disrupts the UK's internal market.
Fair enough,
Viv. Prime Minister bring forward legislation to amend
try and make
the
it a little easier to watch.
Internal Market
We've
Act
got thick
and
old
both guarantee
of
and
gammon like
future-proof
Jeffrey Donaldson.
Northern Ireland's unfettered access to
How
the
about
UK's
you set up? How about you do your fucking job and set up the bloody Northern Ireland Assembly in Stormont again, eh? How about that gets set up?
To do more in this area.
Bloody DUP been blocking it for years now.
Stand ready to legislate to protect Northern Ireland's integral place in the United Kingdom and the UK internal market, alongside an agreement to restore the executive. We can do this at pace, and I know my honourable friend and his colleagues are working hard to achieve that. Our NHS, our police officers, and the most vulnerable in Northern Ireland need devolved government urgently, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to work day and night to help achieve that.
To Luke Evans.
121 MPs from across the House signed my open letter to supermarkets asking to have a Buy British button online. I'm pleased to announce that last week Morrisons were the first supermarket to implement a Buy British tab. That gives consumers the choice to have homegrown produce and also supports our farmers. So will the Prime Minister join my calls to ask other supermarkets to have the courage to make the change and follow suit?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government will always back our farmers, and I welcome the work of my honourable friend and the National Farmers Union on this particular issue. We absolutely support calls for industry-led action on this topic.
No, you don't.
I welcome
you just want to tell farmers what to do.
Buy British
like,
button,
not
British
put.
button at Morrisons.
He wants to tell farmers what they can do with their own fields.
To encourage all retailers to do all they can to showcase the incredible food produced right here in the United Kingdom.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The marriage plans of thousands of couples were dashed last week by the sudden announcement of a big increase in the salary requirement for a spouse visa. Can the Prime Minister give any reassurance to those with very well-advanced marriage plans which appear now to have been scuppered, and to families already in the UK who need to extend their stay who won't comply with the new rules? Can he at least offer some transitional help for families, or does his party's support for the family now only apply to the highly paid?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have a long-standing principle.
They want to stop
that
the rest of
anyone
us
bringing
from
dependents to
enjoying
the UK
the
must be able to
rights
support them
that they don't think
financially.
that we
We should
deserve.
not expect this to be at the taxpayers' expense, and the threshold hasn't been
Why is
raised
it at the taxpayers'
in over
expense?
a decade. It's right that we have now
This is
brought it
bullshit.
in line with the median
This is bullshit.
salary.
No recourse to public funds. No recourse to public funds. It's written in their fucking passports.
The family immigration route, as he
Bastard.
knows, does contain provision for exceptional
Sorry for swearing.
circumstances, but more generally, it's
This
also
one
right,
really,
and I can tell
really
you,
rattles
to look
me.
at transitional arrangements to
Dare
ensure
they?
that they are
How
fair.
dare
And the
they
Home Office
stand in
are
the way
actively looking at
of
this, and will
love?
send
How
out
dare
further
they stand in the way of
information
families
Hold it,
being
Mr.
together?
Croft.
What a
Thank you,
rat.
Mr. Speaker, and I make no apology for raising once again the issue of steel. As we are at serious risk now of losing the ability to make virgin steel here in the UK. I know the government are working hard on this, but it is a matter of
You're
national
going to be
security,
out
and
of
we
a
need
job in a
Prime
few
Minister's
months,
leadership
Holly.
on this issue. What is
Bye-bye,
he doing
Holly.
to ensure that we are able to make our own virgin steel and we don't lose it under his watch?
Mr. Speaker,
You can
can I
have a
praise
stroke.
my friend's
There's
leadership
Alex.
for championing her local community, but also the steel industry in the UK. And she's right to do so, because it is an incredibly important part, not just of our local communities, but of our economy and security. And she is right to put
Mambi.
this issue on the agenda. We are committed to working
Hello,
with the steel
this is
sector
Mambi
to
on the
secure a
phone.
decarbonised
Hello.
future, supporting local economic growth and our levelling up agenda. That includes our commitment for
Don't
major
apologise
support
for
with
swearing
energy
at Tories,
costs,
Graham.
but also
Let's get the old swear jar out.
access to hundreds of £1 millions of grants to support energy efficiency and
It's so
decarbonisation.
full.
I obviously can't comment on conversations with individual companies, but she can see our track record in working with either Celsa or Tata Steel that we have been able to support
Delivering.
our fantastic steel industry and will always continue to do so.
Oh, he's going to say delivering. Disappointed
Mr.
now.
Speaker, a road company has walked away from 13,000 tonnes of hazardous waste in Lancaster, and it's now been on fire for 10 days. There are plumes of smoke covering our city. Lancaster City Council has been left to pick up the tab, and to date they've spent £262,000. Without government support and intervention, this fire will burn for several months. So will the Prime Minister support my local council with swift government support?
Can I thank the honourable member for raising this incredibly important question? I know she's been working alongside my honourable friend, the member for Morecambe, on this. And can I also thank the emergency services in her constituency? Now, my understanding is that Lancaster City Council, the Environment Agency, and the UK HSA and emergency services are working together to ensure that the health risks and environmental consequences are minimised. But I will ensure that the relevant minister understands the absolute urgency of the issue that she's raised, and I'll make sure that she meets with them as soon as
10
possible.
days.
John Mayo.
10
Mr.
days.
Speaker, some dental practices are taking advantage of post-COVID demand to take their NHS practices private, earning more money but leaving behind those most in need. Training a dentist costs constituents in Broadland more than £300,000. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that if a dentist accepts public funding in order to qualify, they should be asked to commit to NHS dentistry for a number of years before going private?
Okay, I admit.
My friend makes an excellent point, and we are
He
investing
made an
£3
excellent
billion
point. I'll go with
into
that.
dentistry. The dentistry contract with the NHS was reformed last year to improve access for patients, and around half of all treatment were delivered to non-paying adults and children. The number of adults has gone up by 10%, the number of children by 15%, but my honourable friend is right, and more needs to be done, and that's why the government will be bringing forward the dentistry recovery plan in due course.
I should have called over.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are 12 days until Christmas, and hundreds of families in Battersea will be worried. Not about being able to buy gifts for children, but whether they can afford food and heat for their homes due to the Tories' cost of living crisis. Over 4,300 emergency food supplies were provided in Battersea by the Wandsworth Food Bank this year, and they have told me that they are bracing for the worst winter yet. So what is the Prime Minister doing to ensure families do not go cold and hungry this Christmas?
The one time one of his own members raised a good question, he just batted it away, said, oh no, everything's great.
Get the
Everything
support
sounds,
that they need
everything's going
through
really
the
well.
winter. That's
Go
why
on.
We increased welfare by
Everything's
record
going
amounts
great.
earlier this year. We supplemented that with cost of living
He's
payments.
going to break into
of
Everything is
£900
Awesome
for the
from
most
the Lego
vulnerable.
movie
It's
in a
why
moment, isn't he?
We supported those with
Come on.
energy bills who need our help.
Don't
The
need to
most
change
pensioners
anything.
in her
Everything's
constituency and
wonderful.
elsewhere will receive up to £300 alongside their winter fuel payment. And
Everything
indeed, that
is
support
just
lasts not just through the
dandy.
winter, but into next year, because we're deeply committed to helping those who need it, and this government has got a track
Should be
record
deeply
of
committed.
delivering that help.
Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is rightly focused on taking long-term decisions to improve the lives of people in this country. So can I make a suggestion? Our mental health legislation is 40 years old, and we made a manifesto commitment in 2017 and 2019 to reform the Mental Health Act, because we have people with learning disabilities and autism sectioned under the Act being kept an inappropriate accommodation for long periods. We have people sectioned under that Act not receiving the compassionate care that they deserve.
God, I'm
and
agreeing
in a
with two
sense
Conservatives
criminalised.
in a row here.
And we have people
Although it's
sectioned
their
under
records
that
that
Act
he's complaining
who,
about here.
have their mental health condition re-stigmatised by the act of sectioning.
Yes.
So would the Prime Minister, in the absence of a bill in the King's Speech, would the Prime Minister agree to meet with me and other like-minded colleagues to discuss how we might be able to take forward reform of the Mental Health Act, because it simply isn't fit for the 21st century?
Yeah, again, I
Can
agree.
I thank my
Bloody hell.
friend for raising this important issue. He's absolutely right about the work
Come on,
that
tell us
needs
that
to be
everything's
done. And I'm
perfect.
grateful to
Everything's
the Joint
great.
Committee
Everything's
on the
going great,
draft
mate.
mental health bill, and our intention is, when parliamentary time allows, to bring forward a bill. I'd be happy to meet with him and colleagues to discuss this, but also just remind everyone that we are undertaking the largest expansion of mental health services in a generation, £2.3 billion of extra funding by March of next year, increasing capital investment in mental health urgent care centres, and under the long-term workforce plan, the largest expansion of the mental health workforce that we've ever seen in this country.
Speller. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rather than the headline chaos of a government that is dominating the media, much more important to the public, business and organisations is their deeply unsatisfactory day-to-day experience in engaging with this dysfunctional administration. As far as they can see, Britain isn't working. When's he going to get a grip?
Everything's great.
Mr. Speaker,
Everything's
the
wonderful.
most pressing issue
Everything's
facing
perfect.
families is the cost of living, which is why this government has delivered what it said, which was to halve
Delivered.
inflation.
Said it again.
Mr. Speaker.
That's the
Not
seventh
just
time.
that, we are supplementing that with significant tax cuts benefiting working families from January, £450 for a typical person in work, demonstrating that we are absolutely on the side of hard-working families, and this government is cutting their taxes.
Mr. Speaker, breast cancer survival rates have improved, but we need to go further on harder-to-reach cancers. There is a drop-in in Parliament this afternoon on lobular breast cancer and the research we need. Could my right honourable friend or his excellent new Secretary of State for Health find time in their busy diaries to join us?
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for the work that he does on this specific and important
Don't know who
issue.
that was. Sorry.
I'm happy to tell him the Health Secretary, I believe, is attending this afternoon's event to hear more about its work. And I can assure him that we're focused on fighting cancer on all fronts. Prevention, diagnosis, treatment,
Time's up, mate.
research
Yeah.
and funding. We are making good progress, but there's always more we
Hope
can
we
do.
finish early
and I
today.
look forward to hearing from him after this afternoon's event.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While Home Secretary was in Rwanda signing his new treaty, his department put out a contract to manage small boat arrivals until 2030 at a £700 million cost to the taxpayer.
700
Doesn't this
million.
show that even the Home Office doesn't think the Minister's plan will work?
Yeah. 700 million pounds.
mischaracterisation, Mr. Speaker,
Oh,
of what was
is
put
it?
out, which
I
was
thought
an
you liked the
advert,
numbers.
not a commitment. But what I can say to the honourable lady, I'm glad that she now cares about this issue, not something that we've seen previously from the side opposite. But our track record is clear. We've got the numbers of small boat arrivals down this year by over a third, Mr. Speaker.
It's more than it
That's
was
what we're
in
doing about it.
2021.
The party opposite are voting against every measure that we've taken.
He's comparing, he's using metrics comparing
Thank you,
their own
Mr.
performance.
Speaker. I chair the caucus of 38 Conservative members of Parliament who have Britain's longest river flowing through their constituencies, and we presented a business case to the Chancellor for £500 million to try to manage this river holistically. Our
This is the guy
constituencies
who
are now facing flooding
asked
every year
the
with the damage that
Polish
causes our
government to
businesses
override
and our communities.
the will of
And
the
this
people
evening I have an
of this
adjournment
country.
debate on flooding of the River
Mad
Severn.
Brexiteer.
Will the Prime Minister take an interest, because the business case shows a GVA uplift for the West Midlands of over £100 billion if we can manage and tame Britain's longest river?
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising this? I do recall he and I spoke about this when I was Chancellor, and I praise him for the work and his leadership on this issue in his local area. I'll make sure the Chancellor does look at the business case, and he will know that we have a significantly increased funding for flood defences.
Apropos of nothing, nearly every single Tory MP that's asked a question in this session was privately educated. Nearly every single one.
Christopher Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what's worse? Losing your WhatsApp messages as a tech pro, losing £11.8 billion to fraud as Chancellor, presiding over the biggest fall in living standards in our history, or desperately clinging on to power when you become even more unpopular than Boris Johnson?
What a brilliant question. Go get it, Chris.
Mr. Speaker,
sit back down.
Just
Sit down and cry. Delivering! Ray said it. That's the 8th time. I'm delivering. What are you delivering? A river full of shit.
Given the appalling reports
God.
of sexual violence committed by Hamas on the 7th of October and the risk that hostages
Shipping
could
Barnett.
have this treatment inflicted on them as well, will he raise this issue in international fora so the international community demands strongly humanitarian access to hostages in Gaza?
Oh, Mr. Speaker, the reports of sexual violence perpetrated by Hamas are deeply shocking. We've raised our concerns with the United Nations a fortnight or so ago, and we are engaging with the Israeli government to consider what further support we can take. And more broadly, we continue to do everything that we can to ensure that all hostages can return safely to their families, including those British hostages and those with links to the UK. And she can rest assured that I and the Foreign Secretary are working tirelessly to bring about their safe return.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Okay, that completes Prime Minister's questions. Bit early today. Well, there you go. And can I just say, Merry Christmas! It's over. Well, Parliament's over, almost. It'll go into recess, and it will be not until Wednesday, the 10th of January, when you can join us again here in the House of Commons. The House of Commons. It's just the green screen. Where we will be laughing, crying, pulling our hair out, and often swearing about the nonsense that is coming out of Rishi Sunak's face. Two good questions there, actually, from Conservative MPs. One concerning, if dentists are getting subsidies from the taxpayer, it makes sense that there should be a minimum amount of time they have to spend in the NHS. And the other one about mental health, which is two things that the Tories could have done something about. Over the last 14 years they've been in power, but they haven't, because they don't care. They're too busy prattling about spending £700 million of our money, sending nobody to Rwanda. £700 million. Okay, so that's it for today for Prime Minister's questions. I hope it makes it a little bit easier to watch these things as we do them live. A bit of commentary, and obviously you can write what you like within reason in the chat there. It's become painful to listen to because these Tory lies. We'll have to next year. I might rejig the format a little bit and actually have some animations set up. So when he says delivering, it comes up on the screen, delivering. Or when he says just comes out with some statistics about stuff. Or when he measures, this is what he does all the time. He measures statistics against the Tories' own record. That is so rubbish. It's like a kid who has just got constant E's and then they get a D and they're like, well, it's a 20% rise from last year. Yeah, but you're comparing yourself to yourself. If you compared it to anybody else in the class, you'll see where you were coming in the class. And if you were coming bottom, you're still coming bottom. But personally, I've gone up a grade. Yeah, but you're still at the bottom of the class. That's where we are at the moment. And just the idea that the Labour government didn't spend as much. It loves doing this. Inflation, mate, everything costs more now than it used to. Does that make sense? Like, so if Labour spent £1 billion on hospitals, building new hospitals, and back in 2003, and here we are 20 years later, and the Tories spend £1 billion, that £1 billion isn't going to go as far as it would have done 20 years ago. Anyway, right, One Angry Pagan, thank you very much. Sure that you're back as well, my friend. Thank you to Plum Duff and to Nick and Diff and to Countdown to Power and Leanne Scott and everybody else. And John James Tony just shouts, "Stick it to him, Chris," which I love. And I'll be back on Friday with Morning Brew. And then we're going to have the agenda. And then we're also going to have a big Labour social in which we're hopefully going to be playing the Mystery Hour game, James O'Brien's Mystery Hour game this Friday. So look out for that. Our friend and my colleague, Phil Morehouse, will be here in the morning for Morning Brew at 9:30 live. I'll be in the chat, so please join us for that. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.